Hey, I'm Doug here at Global West, and today we're going to show you how to install an MNR 733 kit for Mustangs, which is 67 through 73. Now this particular car we're going to do is a 67 Mustang. So for 67 through 70, this is going to be direct. 71 through 3, the arm still fits, but the tower where we put it, the control arm to, is a little bit different. So we'll probably show you one of those one of these days when we get one in that will do. But for now, the 67 through 70 is going to be the target. We have an MNR 733 on the table here, which is a negative roll system. It's for geometry, changing the camber curve, which is a handling package. We're also going to install our S26 springs. It's a 540 rate, and we're going to put the bearing style spring saddles on the car rather than using the rubber or a polyurethane. So we've got quite a bit of work to do. Let's go back and get started. So as you can see, now that we have the shock out, we're going to use a spring compressor, and we have to take tension off the spring. And they make several different spring compressors. We'll lay this across the top, and we'll be able to draw the spring up and take pressure off the upper control arm. So what we're going to do is hook these as such. And all I got to do, once I get that on, just turn them so I have a little bit of tension, as you can see right there. Now we're going to draw it up. Okay, there we go. See, the spring is off the spring saddle. Now we're going to go ahead and pop the upper ball joints, and we're going to take the upper arm off. There we go. Now we're going to take the upper arm off from the inside. So on this Mustang, it's pretty easy to get to, but we've worked on some where you can barely see the bolts because of the way the headers are and whether it's got a big block or not. So on the upper control arm on 67 through 70s, they don't have shims in them. If it was a 64 through 66, the alignment was done from the upper control arms, and you would have shims in behind the shaft on the upper arm. But on these, that's not the case. Okay, now that we got the arm off, we're going to release the spring compressor. Okay, see that? We had plenty of spring compressor to allow the spring to go totally loose, which is great for safety issues, because we don't want any tension on that spring when the spring compressor comes off, because it could shoot out. So here you go, nice and easy. So we're going to put our template in here, and pop center punch where the drill where we're going to drill our new holes, and go ahead and drill. Now these are 1/2 inch, and what we're going to do is go to a 9/16. Our particular control arms run a little bit larger bolt. So that'll be our next step, and we'll get this compressor out of the way. There's our template, ready to go. We'll put the bolts in, and we're going to center punch these. Okay, now I got my center punch holes. I know where to drill, and now we're going to step drill it. What we're going to do here is pop these off real quick. I decided to take a moment here and talk to you about the upper control arms. We have a lot of questions about what is right and what is left in reference for driver-passenger sides. This being a stock upper control arm on Mustangs, the ball joint is in the center. So when you look at this, this is not offset. It's right through the center of the arm. And so for stock upper control arms, there's no directional arm. It could be a right, it could be a left side, it doesn't matter what, because they're non-directional. But when you get to the M&Rs, these 733s, they are. Because we put caster into the control arm, and we get a lot of questions like, okay, how do I know the difference? So here's a good way of looking at it. So when you tilt the arm up, you'll notice that if you went through the center line of the arm, this ball joint is offset. It's to one side or the other. The ball joint needs to go towards the rear of the car when you assemble. So in this particular case, since you go through the center line and the ball joint's here to this side, we're going to put this on the passenger side. Looking at this one, comes up, the ball joint is to this side now. So when it bolts onto the car, it moves it back. Now that's the driver's side. Real easy to tell from something that's in the center. And if you're still confused, which that should be pretty clear, there's also D's and P's stamped on the arm. D for driver, P for passenger. But just looking at it and understanding what we're trying to do with the caster, this here becomes very easy on the installation. And you'll notice I have a 3/8 plate on here. Right here. Now this 3/8 plate, when you install it on the car, is going to go on like this. This plate goes between the control arm shaft and the tower, okay? This goes like this. Now, there's a trick you need to know about. On this particular car, when the alignment is all set, when it was brought in, this fender edge was rubbing on the tire under a severe bump. And it was aligned fine. The other side is fine in reference to rubbing, but this side does rub. So if you run into a situation like that, here's a trick you can do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install this, but I'm not going to put the 3/8 plate on here. We're just going to install it like this. And you have an eccentric on the lower control arm where your camber is adjusted from. But that eccentric can be rotated, and that's part of your camber adjustment. So if we were to take this out like we're going to do, which moves the upper ball joint in further away from the fender, I may have a lot of negative camber now, but I can use the eccentric down at the bottom, and I can slide the lower arm over a little bit, and with any luck, you'll be able to move this entire package over. You know, you could get as max as 3/8 of an inch, but probably not. It's probably going to be a little bit less. But the point of the matter is you're pulling it away from this fender lip here and could possibly get away from your tire rubbing. And that's the whole idea. So we're going to do that on this side because this side does have a problem. And you're right, maybe it's the fender, how was it bolted on? It could be a number of things. The car has been painted, has been through the body shop. Everything seems to line up well. So instead of getting into that, we're just going to move this over a little bit, okay? So that's what we're going to do. But this shim can be used for alignment purposes. These shock towers on Mustangs are everywhere. They've had years on them. It's not going to be perfectly square. They're literally everywhere. So you may need the shim, you may not need the shim, but you do, at least you'll know that that shim, that 3/8 plate, if you need to, can be removed. Now on the other side of it, let's say you need to have more positive camber because the tower was leaned in, somebody repaired it, and they didn't pull it out all the way as far as they could, okay? Then you would leave this in, and you would put shims on the upper control arm, similar to that on 64 through 6 Mustangs, and it would go between the 3/8 plate and the shock tower. They would go right here, not in between here, right here. And then you'll have your positive camber back, or less negative camber, whatever the situation is. But you have a lot of latitude here for what you want to do with that alignment. So, no 3/8 shim on this side. So let's go ahead and put this thing together. Flat washers first, lock washer the nut. Now we're going to tighten these down, and it's nice to have a friend to help you in this situation because you need somebody in the engine compartment while you hold this out. Hold the bolt out here. Now we got this in, we want to make sure we've got them torqued. So the torque spec on these upper bolts is 90 foot-pounds. So we're going to do that next, and then we'll proceed. The spring saddle goes here. Now there's stock spring saddles, polyurethane spring saddles, and of course the bearings. Now we're going to put the bearing spring saddle on because that's really the best way to go, to be honest with you. But on negative roll cars, this is a stock spring saddle right here. You got this? Okay, the stock spring saddle. I'm going to take this off real quick and I'm going to show you what's going on with it in case you decide to use a stock one. And we'll tell you what's going on here. Because you can run a stock one with our package if you want to. Or you could use the polyurethane ones, either way. But on the spring saddle, this is in fairly good shape, to be honest with you. First, if you were going to use a stock spring saddle on this control arm, you would press these bolts out. Because these bolts aren't long enough. And in our kit, we're going to give you longer bolts to fit here. So you would press these out, but the thing is you see how the shaft is on an angle versus, if I hold this parallel, you see how the shaft is on an angle right here? That's the way it's molded specifically. And they do that deliberately because the angle of the upper control arm, the factory arm, and the way the ball joint is positioned, see how the angle of this ball joint is? Okay. These sit kind of like this in the car. Now we dropped it way down here. That's why this arm won't work. See, the ball joint angle gets out of whack here. It's too extreme. But they sit in the car like this. And the spring saddle is set up so that when it's in the car, like this, and the spring is sitting about here, it's pretty much in alignment. It's pretty straight. There's no load. But if I was to take and move this arm like this, like we're doing, it's going to put a lot of twist on this rubber bushing right here. You see that angle that's now happening simply because I moved this down? Because that's what we're doing on the cars. We're moving the pickup point here lower. So you see how far this goes off. So now, when you put your spring on here, this rubber bushing wraps up, and there's a lot of tension on it. It'll prematurely wear it out. But the other thing it does is it's going to affect your ride height, because it's actually going to keep the car raised up. And if you put lowering springs on it, guess what? You know, like this package here. If you were to put your stock spring on this control arm, with this spring saddle, it'll go above stock ride height. Okay? Won't work. You want to run a shorter spring, and this has to be rotated. So if you're running this, we tell you to invert it. So you see now that since the lower control arm is on a different angle, this has very little, if I had that arm here, it would have very little twist on this bushing. But what you have to do so it clears everything is you got a radius just a little bit right here, and that's it. So this will pivot inside the arm when it's moving. That's all you have to do. And it's in the instruction sheet. Now so the tang, which normally goes to the inside, would then go to the outside. That's the tang we're talking about in the instruction sheet. But if you're running a polyurethane upper mount or a bearing upper mount like we're going to show you, let's get the bearing mount real quick, please. Oh, here we go. So whether it's poly or bearing, see how this rotates? The shaft, there's no resistance to it. Now you don't have to worry about that angle that we're talking about here. Okay. And if you'll also notice the way these are made, you see here, this is radiused off and this isn't. See it? So these here can be put on just like they're supposed to, and you're not going to have an issue. So polyurethane and bearing goes the stock configuration like this. If it's the rubber style, you have to invert it so the tang is out here and modify that a little bit to clear. Okay, that's it. So because we're using these, we're back to the same stock procedure. Okay, now in the kit you're going to get hardware that we'll use to install this. So these simply go on top here. Drop this down through. So we're going to tighten these down. Now also I should mention that in this particular kit, you get the rubber little pads for here. They look like this. And you basically just put them in the hole there and pull them through. Like that. The torque on this is 26 pounds. The next thing we got to do is we're going to go ahead and get that spring in there and pull that spring up into the pocket. It'll make it easier to do it right now than if the arm was attached. Now I'm going to put this together. Now this is what came out, and you can see this here. This is on all Fords. It's just a rubber, it's not even really a cushion. It's just a rubber piece to separate the metal from the spring to the shock tower. I've seen this, and I have ran in situations where we didn't have these, and we put the spring in relationship like on a race car or something, and even on one of my Mustangs, and I never had a noise problem with it, but I would put them in. So we also have them available as well, and this is a 1304, and this will sit right in there like that for isolation. And we also make those in different heights. So if your car is too low because for whatever reason, or you trimmed a coil or whatever the case is and it's too low, we have different spacers on the top here, spring cushions if you will, in 3 different sizes to raise the vehicle back up, so you don't have to buy another set of springs. But these are a standard size. So we're going to put this on first. The spring tang index is in the back, and we're going to slide this up in here, and we're going to hook the spring compressor from inside onto the coils, and we're going to pull the spring back up into the pocket. So that's what we're going to do. So there's an index in the top of the spring mount here in the tower. That index is the spring. And so what I'm doing is, as you can see, with my hand, I'm tightening down the adjusting at the top, which is pulling this up. And I'm using this hand to align the spring in the pocket before I put pressure on the spring to tighten it up quickly. So I'm getting everything lined up. Like that. I got my tang lined up here. like so. Now I'm going to pull this up so I can put this together. Okay, go ahead and pull the full jack up, please. Okay, everything lined up. We got to torque the ball joint to 90 foot-pounds. You're going to take an Allen wrench, and we did this deliberately because you got a bump stop right here. Now we don't want you to have a situation where the grease zerk, which goes here, we don't want that hitting this bump stop up here. We wanted to hit it flat across here. That's why we put the button head. So we give you the grease fittings. Go ahead and put it in, and what you want to do is you want to lubricate the ball joint now. There is some lube in there when you initially get it, but it's not enough. So we'll do a quick lubrication. We recommend the GR1 grease. We use it in all of our bushings, ball joints, U-joints, and it's a high temp grease. We can even use it in the wheel bearings. So once you lubricate it, you're going to have to pop this back out. And we'll reinstall this, the button head. Like I said, this is what's going to hit the bump stop up here, and we don't want to have a grease fitting on there. One, you'll break the grease fitting right off, and then you'll have another problem. First it'll be open, and then when you decide to grease the ball joint, you won't be able to. So that's what we do with that. We got that. The ball joint's tight. Put a cotter pin in. Next thing to do is we're going to drop the shock in. What we're going to use today are Viking shocks. We have them on the rear, and we're going to go ahead and put a set on the front. Now these are double adjustable, and this is a direct bolted. So we're going to go ahead and install this. And these knobs you can adjust the dampening. The left side adjusts the bump. The right side over here will adjust the rebound. Bump is the shock going up, compressing. Rebound is it coming out. Okay. So on our initial setup, there's detents, and we're going to start out here because this is a street car now. So I'm going to start out with like 5 clicks in from full soft, and on rebound I'm going to go to 7. Actually 8. And we'll adjust from there. Okay, so that's what we got going on. So let's just go ahead and install this. These install just like the factory shocks. Okay, so on the Viking we're going to install this in our factory shock mount here, and this has to come up through and go on the top. And as you can see, a little bit of a problem here. Not to worry. So you're just going to take this clip off. Okay. It's offset. In business. Now we'll tap it back the other way. And put the C-clip back on. Make sure that your cushions are on first when you drop it down through. Okay. See here, we're getting it started. We're going to use the floor jacket. We're going to lift the lower under the control arm. We're going to lift it up a little bit, make it a little bit easier so we can get to those. Okay, so we just need to pick it up just a little, like you see right there. That's excellent, right there. Then you're going to put it together. Rubber cushion first, flat washer, nut. The next step is, now that we got the shock in, we'll go ahead and put these back on, put the shock mounted on. Okay, 9/16. Okay. Now we just do the other side. After we do the other side, next step, be along the front end.